Live. Today, we are embarking on a truly profound journey. We're going into one of life's most enduring and, frankly, captivating mysteries, the transition of consciousness, specifically at those very liminal states, birth, and maybe even more strikingly, at death.
Absolutely. It's a frontier of understanding,
Yep.
really.
And we're going to be delving deep into a groundbreaking new white paper. It's called the DMT decoupling protocol.
Right.
And it doesn't just describe these strange phenomena, it actually offers a novel, scientifically grounded model to explain them. We're talking about experiences that, well, they've long challenged our conventional understanding of how the brain creates consciousness.
Exactly. Things like terminal lucidity, near-death experiences.
Precisely, things that make you scratch your head.
Indeed. And these aren't just, medical curiosities or isolated anecdotes. They're profound paradoxes. They directly confront our prevailing scientific models, especially the idea that the brain is the mind, full stop.
Right, the brain as producer model.
Exactly. Take terminal lucidity. It's astonishing. You have patients with severe brain damage, maybe advanced dementia, maybe in a deep coma.
People you wouldn't expect any coherence from.
None at all. And then suddenly, moments or maybe hours before death, they regain this profound mental clarity. They're coherent. They reconnect emotionally.
It sounds almost miraculous.
It does. But the question is, if consciousness is just a product of brain activity, how can a severely compromised, degenerating brain suddenly produce such a coherent, articulate mind in its final moments? It just doesn't fit the standard model. It's a direct contradiction.
And it's not the only challenge, is it? Near-death experiences, NDEs, they pose a similar problem.
A huge one. We have these incredibly consistent reports across cultures, across time, from individuals who were clinically dead, hard-stopped, sometimes no measurable brain activity, or at least had minimal brain function.
And yet they describe these structured, deeply profound, often intensely vivid experiences.
Right. Not just random flashes or, chaotic firings of a dying brain. These often involve clear narratives, profound emotional states, often overwhelming love or peace, sometimes meeting deceased relatives, or encountering what's perceived as a divine light or presence.
And they describe it as hyperreal, sometimes more real than normal waking life.
That's a very common description. And for many people, these experiences fundamentally shift their entire worldview, their perspective on life and death.
So this white paper, the DMT decoupling protocol, it argues these aren't just glitches in the system.
Not at all. It argues against dismissing them as, say, simple oxygen deprivation hallucinations or some other byproduct of a failing brain. Instead, it frames them as potential crucial clues.
Clues to what, exactly?
Clues to a deeper, maybe even pre-programmed biological process, perhaps even involving quantum-level events. This model suggests these experiences might be part of a deliberate, organized transition of consciousness.
Wow, okay. So not brain failure, but maybe brain transformation or something beyond the brain.
Something like that. It suggests it's a sophisticated, multi-layered protocol that gets initiated right at life's very edge. A final act, perhaps.
So this white paper introduces, as it says, a novel, scientifically grounded model for the transition of consciousness at the liminal states of birth and death. It's trying to tackle these persistent paradoxes head-on.
That's the goal, to give us a framework to understand what might be happening to our awareness when the physical body is at its most vulnerable, or even when it stops functioning altogether.
And its mission is pretty ambitious, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It aims to provide a complete, coherent, and crucially, a testable, multi-layered explanation for this transition. It's pulling together insights from neurochemistry, quantum physics, even looking seriously at subjective reports, the phenomenology of the experience itself.
So it's proposing a specific mechanism.
Yes, complete with biochemical triggers,
Yeah.
measurable physical signatures, things we could potentially detect, and a really radical concept of how consciousness itself might actively shape the reality perceived in these moments.
Actively shape reality. That sounds mind-bending.
It is. The core idea is exploring how consciousness might persist or transform, or maybe even, as the name suggests, decouple from its material anchor, the body, when the physical system is nearing its end.
Okay. So for you, our listener, this means we're going on a journey through this protocol, step by step. We'll start with the biochemical side, the triggers. Then we'll look at the observable physical signatures this protocol might leave behind. And this connects to some fascinating physics, light, quantum stuff.
Right, the electrical and quantum levels.
And finally, we'll dive into those really radical concepts about how consciousness might be an active participant shaping the experience. We'll touch on psychedelic insights, maybe even ancient mystical visions.
It connects a lot of dots, or attempts to.
It really does.
Right.
So get ready, because this deep dive, I think, is going to profoundly expand your understanding of life, death, and maybe the very nature of reality itself. It's quite the intellectual adventure we're embarking on.
Let's dive in.
Okay, let's unpack this. The core biochemical trigger proposed by the protocol. It's a massive endogenous flood of N,N,N-dimethyltryptamine, DMT.
That's the starting point.
Now, DMT, for many people, that probably rings a bell as a pretty potent psychedelic substance, right? Associated with these intense, short, visionary trips.
It certainly is known for that, yes, when taken exogenously from outside the body.
But what's its role here? Produced inside our own bodies, naturally, right at the edge of life.
And that's the crucial distinction, endogenous DMT. It is naturally produced in the mammalian brain and body. Now, its exact physiological role in just, normal day-to-day functioning, that's still debated, still under active research.
Okay.
But what's becoming clearer, especially from cutting-edge animal model research, is that its levels seem to spike significantly under conditions of extreme physiological stress.
Like what kind of stress?
Think about severe hypoxia, critical lack of oxygen getting to the brain, or cardiac arrest when the heart stops beating.
Which are precisely the conditions often surrounding NDEs and terminal lucidity.
Exactly. So the DMT decoupling protocol proposes that this isn't just a random occurrence. It suggests a massive endogenous flood of DMT acts as the primary, maybe even pre-programmed trigger for a highly specific, intricate end-of-life cascade.
Like the body has a built-in emergency protocol involving this chemical.
Kind of like a failsafe, maybe? A final, powerful chemical release orchestrated right at the threshold of existence. It's not just a byproduct. It's proposed as the initiator.
So it's not just some, leftover chemical floating around. It's a potent, naturally occurring agent the body seems to deploy right at this critical moment.
That's the hypothesis.
And the paper suggests it's not just doing one thing, right?
Yeah.
This final DMT flood, it apparently serves two critical roles simultaneously, like a two-pronged approach.
Precisely. According to the protocol, this final surge acts like a master key, unlocking a dual action sequence. First function, neuroprotection.
Protecting the brain.
Well, studies, especially looking at how DMT interacts with something called the sigma-1 receptor, have shown it can robustly increase the survival rate of neurons during severe hypoxia.
So when the brain is starved of oxygen, which normally causes massive damage.
Right. Normally that leads to rapid, often irreversible damage to brain cells. But DMT, by activating this sigma-1 receptor, seems to act like a cellular shield. It essentially buys time.
Buys time for what?
To keep the brain's fundamental hardware, its structure, viable and functional, just long enough for this complex transitional protocol to actually complete. It's like keeping the lights on, just barely, for one critical final operation, making sure the brain could still process something for that brief, pivotal window.
That's incredible. A self-preservation mechanism even as the system is failing. But the second function, the paper calls it antenna retuning. That sounds even more out there.
It does, but it gets to the heart of how consciousness itself might be altered in these states. Antenna retuning is a good analogy.
Yeah.
While the neuroprotection is preserving the physical structure, DMT simultaneously seems to radically alter the brain's operating parameters, how it processes information.
No so.
Brain imaging studies, mostly with exogenous DMT, for obvious reasons, show it induces a state that researchers describe as network disintegration and desegregation.
Network disintegration. Sounds bad.
It sounds chaotic, but maybe it's purposeful. What it means, basically, is that it collapses the brain's normal hierarchical organization. Usually our brain has different regions specializing in different tasks, communicating in a very structured, orderly way. That gives us our stable, coherent view of the world.
Right. Keeps things organized.
But DMT seems to scramble that hierarchy. It induces a more fluid, hyperconnected, and almost anarchic state. Normal boundaries between brain regions seem to dissolve, and information flows much more freely, much less restrictedly.
Okay, so if I'm getting this, our brain normally acts like a filter, right? A receiver tuned to a specific frequency, what we call reality.
That's a common analogy, yes.
We have things like the default mode network, the DMN, which seems to anchor our sense of self, our normal stream of consciousness, keeping us grounded in the everyday world.
It plays a big role in that, yes. Our self-narrative, our stable perception.
So this DMT flood, it essentially takes that filter offline. or maybe radically retunes it to a completely different bandwidth. It opens the channels, letting in a much broader spectrum of information, signals we normally just screen out. Is that the idea?
That's a really powerful and, I think, accurate way to put it. The DMN is crucial for constructing and maintaining that stable sense of self and everyday reality. By disrupting its normal function and the function of other established networks, DMT basically allows for a broader, less filtered reception.
Like turning off the noise cancellation.
Or like switching, as you suggested, from a finely tuned radio receiver locked onto one station to a wide spectrum scanner, suddenly picking up countless signals from everywhere. Some familiar, maybe, but others entirely alien. This retuning is absolutely critical for the next stages the protocol describes. It's preparing the system for a different kind of signal processing, potentially much richer, much less constrained.
Preparing the brain for a radically different kind of experience.
Exactly.
Fascinating. Okay, so we have this initial trigger, the DMT flood, doing its dual job, protecting the brain for a bit, and radically altering how it operates, retuning the antenna. But you said this isn't the experience itself. This just kicks off a cascade of downstream events.
Correct. It's the starting gun.
And this is where it gets, as the paper suggests, really interesting. Because now we're talking about observable signatures, electrical, and even quantum. Let's start with the electrical stuff. What can we actually measure in the brain?
Right. So the DMT flood starts the sequence. But the profound subjective experience really begins with the subsequent neurochemical events. These are largely driven by that severe oxygen deprivation, the anoxia, that often happens during clinical death.
Okay.
This anoxia leads to a massive, uncontrolled release of glutamate. Now, glutamate is a key neurotransmitter, vital for learning, memory.
But too much is bad.
Way too much is toxic. This flood causes overstimulation of brain cells, a state called excitotoxicity. Neurons get so overwhelmed they can be severely damaged, even die. Normally, this just sounds like catastrophic breakdown, total system failure.
Yeah, sounds like the opposite of a coherent experience.
It does. But here's the paradox. In this specific, unique context created by the DMT presence, something highly organized seems to happen instead of just chaos.
How so?
Well, preclinical studies suggest that the activation of serotonin 5-HT2A receptors, which are the main receptors DMT acts on, actually redirects this potential chaos.
Redirects it.
Yes. In a way that depends on that glutamate flood. This 5-HT2A activation doesn't lead to random, messy brain activity. Instead, it triggers a paradoxical surge of highly organized, highly coherent electrical activity, specifically in the gamma wave frequency band.
Gamma waves. Okay. So in the middle of the brain potentially shutting down, you get this final burst of brilliant, synchronized electrical activity.
That's the proposal. A burst of highly energetic, highly patterned oscillation. A final flare of complex activity.
And gamma waves, for those who might not know, they aren't just random noise, are they? They're linked to higher cognitive functions.
Very much so. Gamma activity is often associated with things like intense focus, peak conscious perception, rapid memory retrieval, and importantly, the binding of different sensory inputs into a single unified conscious experience.
Okay, so this provides a potential neurological basis for those life review phenomena reported in NDEs, where people see their whole life flash before them with incredible clarity.
Exactly. That sense of rapid, comprehensive memory recall. It could also help explain the temporary, almost baffling restoration of memory and clarity we see in terminal lucidity patients. It's like a final, brilliant flash of comprehensive awareness, a grand finale of neural integration powered by this gamma surge.
Wow, that offers a powerful, measurable link between the subjective reports and actual neuroscience, a potential mechanism.
It does. It suggests a neurobiological underpinning for experiencing such profound clarity right at the brink of death. But the DMT decoupling protocol doesn't stop there. It goes even deeper.
Deeper how?
It posits a quantum-level signature, moving beyond electrical signals to the fundamental nature of light itself.
Right. This is where the biophotons come in, the quantum signature. What exactly are biophotons, these ultra-weak light emissions?
They are literally that, incredibly faint light emitted by all living cells. It's a natural byproduct of metabolic processes, especially things involving oxidative stress, which is part of how cells generate energy.
So like a very, very dim glow of life inside us.
You can think it that way. Too dim for our eyes to see, but measurable with very sensitive equipment. Now, crucially, cellular stress or damage, exactly what's happening during anoxia, and that excitotoxicity we talked about, dramatically increases this biophoton emission.
And then it stops when?
It ceases upon death, when metabolic activity stops.
Yeah.
So the DMT decoupling protocol hypothesizes that this whole cascade, the DMT, the excitotoxicity, the cellular death processes in the dying brain, would naturally produce a final massive and coherent burst of biophotons.
Coherent meaning organized light, not just random flickers.
Yes, like laser light is coherent compared to a light bulb. The idea is that this isn't just a random byproduct of dying cells, it's an organized field of light.
And this is where the really radical proposal comes in, that this coherent light field, this biophoton burst, is proposed as the quantum level carrier of consciousness.
That is the core, bold hypothesis bridging the biology and the physics here. It suggests this burst of light is the physical signature, the manifestation of what the paper calls the non-local information wave, being released or decoupling from its material anchor, the body.
Wow. Okay, to really get that, we need to understand why light is so special in this context.
Exactly. We need to appreciate the fundamental nature of light. As the physicist Gideon Kokuk explains it, you simply cannot build a universe, not our universe anyway, without light, or more broadly, electromagnetism. The laws of physics wouldn't hang together without it.
It's not just in the universe, it allows the universe to work.
In a sense, yes. Light is essential for mediating between different physical rules. It enforces things like the universal speed limit, and it maintains the fundamental symmetries that govern the cosmos. It's the glue, in a way.
Kokuk describes it as wobbling electromagnetism, right? This oscillation traveling incredibly fast.
300,000 kilometers per second. The universal speed limit. And that speed isn't arbitrary. It's deeply connected to how space and time work, ensuring cause and effect play out consistently everywhere.
And the particles of light, photons, they have a special job in physics.
They do. They're called gauge bosons. Kokuk uses a great analogy. Imagine two distant parts of the universe. If you change something fundamental in one part, like rotating a quantum wave,
Okay.
for the universe's symmetries to hold true everywhere, the other distant part somehow needs to know about that change coordinately. But information can't travel faster than light, so you need a messenger particle to carry that symmetry-maintaining information.
And photons are those messengers.
Photons are the gauge bosons for electromagnetism. They ensure these fundamental symmetries are upheld across space-time, transmitting information without breaking the speed limit. They are the universe's communicators, maintaining its coherence.
Okay, bringing that back to the protocol. The biophoton burst isn't just random light. It's proposed as a coherent field that acts like a kind of quantum messenger for consciousness itself.
That's the leap. That this coherent biophoton field, in this specific biological context, carries the individual's information wave, their consciousness, away from the dying biological hardware.
Decoupling it.
Effectively decoupling it.
Huh.
This ties the specific biological events of dying directly to fundamental quantum principles governing information and symmetry in the universe. It's audacious, suggesting consciousness might leverage the universe's most fundamental messenger light to transition.
Truly mind-expanding. Okay, so we've got the trigger, the electrical surge, the quantum light burst. Now let's shift to the subjective realm, the actual experience.
All right, what does it feel like?
The protocol views the DMT state not just as a chemical side effect, but as a kind of rehearsal for the death transition. And this is where observer shaping comes in. What is that?
Observer shaping is a really core and, yes, radical idea in this model. It suggests that when the brain's normal filters the networks like the DMN that shape and limit our perception are suspended by that DMT flood.
When the antenna is retuned.
Exactly. Then, the individual's information wave, carried perhaps by that biophoton burst, interacts directly with what the paper calls a field of pure potential.
A field of pure potential, like raw information.
Something like that. And the crucial part is that the reality that emerges from this interaction isn't some fixed, universal afterlife that's identical for everyone. Instead, it's described as a co-creation.
Co-creation, meaning?
Meaning, the reality experienced in that liminal state is uniquely shaped by the observer's own deepest beliefs, memories, and archetypal structures. It's a personalized reality, dynamically generated through the interaction between the individual consciousness and this potential field.
So consciousness isn't just watching a movie, it's helping direct the movie in these moments.
That's the essence of observer shaping, active participation in reality creation.
This immediately makes me think of people like Terence McKenna, right? Who explored these altered states so deeply.
His work is definitely relevant here. McKenna argued forcefully that these states fundamentally disrupt the ordinary consensus-based perception of reality. They reveal, he thought, that reality is much more contingent, more malleable than we normally assume.
He talked about a fundamental word logos underlying reality.
Yes, or translinguistic matter. His idea, based on his experiences, was that language, or information, isn't just something we use to describe reality. He felt it might be the underlying generative principle of reality itself. The reality, at its deepest level, is made of information, of language in a very broad sense.
His famous line from True Hallucinations, things are what we say they are.
Exactly. So, in these liminal states, according to the protocol's logic, with the brain's filters down, the individual's information wave, their core consciousness pattern, could directly interact with that foundational informational layer. The subjective experience then becomes a manifestation of how that individual consciousness interprets, structures, and essentially speaks this raw potential into a perceived reality.
Their internal narrative gains direct access to the cosmic source code, almost.
That's a dramatic way to put it, but it captures the flavor of the idea, yes.
And this idea of reality being shaped by underlying information patterns, that connects to Rupert Sheldrake's work too, doesn't it? Morphic fields.
It certainly resonates with Sheldrake's hypotheses, yes. Sheldrake proposed morphic fields as these non-physical organizing principles. Fields within and around systems, as he put it, where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts.
And they have memory.
That's key. He suggests they contain an inherent memory, built up through morphic resonance. This resonance, he argues, occurs from similar patterns of activity in self-organizing systems, influencing subsequent similar systems across time and space.
Like his famous example of crystals forming more easily once they form somewhere else.
Right. Or rats learning tricks faster if other rats have already learned them elsewhere. The idea is that the morphic field for that pattern gets stronger, making it easier for subsequent systems to tap into it. So these fields act like invisible blueprints, guiding development and behavior, implying a kind of non-local collective memory for species, for forms, for habits.
Now, Sheldrake's ideas have definitely faced pushback from mainstream science. Pseudoscience is a term often used, mainly because there wasn't a clear physical mechanism proposed.
That's been the major criticism, yes.
Yeah.
How does this non-local information transfer actually happen physically?
But the source material mentions something called PSUOO, trying to address that. Psychedelic superfluid something.
Yes, PSEOP is the psychedelic superfluid universal morphonic oceanic wave theory. It's an attempt, outlined in the sources, to provide exactly that missing physical mechanism for morphic resonance.
How does it try to do that?
It synthesizes Sheldrake's ideas with Alan Turing's work on morphogenesis. Turing, the computing pioneer, also developed mathematical models showing how simple chemical reactions and diffusion could create complex biological patterns like stripes on a zebra.
Okay.
PSUOP integrates this by proposing that a fundamental substrate of the cosmos, this theoretical universal superfluid, has collective excitations, ripples called phonons. And these phonons, governed by Turing-like mathematics, could act as the physical carriers of morphic information. They could encode cosmic habits, stable resonant patterns within the superfluid itself.
So morphic fields wouldn't just be abstract ideas, but actual physical patterns in the universe's basic substrate.
That's the theoretical link PSUOP tries to forge, making non-local collective memory physically plausible via these superfluid phonons.
So in this view, during the DMT decoupling, consciousness might be tapping into these fundamental informational fields. But what about the quantum observer effect? We hear that term thrown around a lot regarding consciousness influencing reality. Physics usually defines it differently though, right?
Absolutely critical distinction. In physics, the observer effect strictly means the physical disturbance caused by the act of measurement. Measuring a quantum system inevitably involves interacting with it physically, which changes its state. It's about the measuring device, not the consciousness of the person looking at the device.
Like in the double slit experiment, trying to see which slit the electron goes through physically forces it to act like a particle.
Precisely. It's a physical interaction, not mind over matter in the popular sense. However,
There's a however.
There's a nuance. The source language shapes perceived reality points out that while we shouldn't confuse quantum measurement with, say, social influence, our conceptual frameworks are language, the questions we ask inevitably guide how we design experiments and what we choose to measure.
So our ideas shape the questions,
Yeah.
which shape the measurements.
Exactly. And at the quantum level, measurement is inherently participatory and state-altering. So how we define particle guides our measurement strategy, and that measurement physically influences the outcome. It's a subtle but profound interplay between concept, action, and result.
And PSUOP takes this further with its psychedelic vector idea. suggesting altered states offer direct experience of this.
That's the proposal within PSMO, yes. It suggests that certain altered states may be DMT-induced ones, where people report subjectively perceiving, say, light as either a wave or a particle, seemingly based on their intent or focus.
They feel like they're choosing.
They report feeling like they are. PSMO interprets this not as mere hallucination, but as a potential direct phenomenological encounter with wave-particle duality, a conscious experience of the observer effect.
Like experiencing John Wheeler's participatory universe firsthand.
That's the connection they make, where observation, in this broader, more participatory sense, is actively shaping the perceived reality. It radically suggests that structured subjective experience itself could be a valid channel for scientific data about the fundamental nature of reality, expanding what we consider observable.
A truly radical reframing. And if consciousness can actively shape reality like this, especially in these liminal states, this observer-shaping idea could solve a puzzle, couldn't it? Why mystical visions across different cultures often seem to share underlying structures or archetypes, even if the surface details are totally different.
Exactly. The model proposes a kind of common grammar of the divine, a universal underlying syntax for these profound experiences. But the specific vocabulary, the imagery, is projected by the individual's own cultural and personal background.
So like Ezekiel's eyed wheels in the Old Testament complex, geometric, terrifying divine machinery, and Terence McKenna's descriptions of, say, jeweled, self-dribbling basketballs or self-transforming machine elves during DMT trips.
Wildly different images, seemingly.
But the DMT decoupling protocol might interpret them as what? Different interpretations of the same underlying thing.
Precisely. Different cultural or personal manifestations of the same fundamental geometric and intelligent information structures encountered in that deep field of potential. The core architecture, the grammar is consistent, but the mind shapes its presentation through its own lens, beliefs, memories, culture.
So one person sees angels, another sees intricate alien geometry, but maybe they're both perceiving facets of the same underlying informational structure.
That's the explanatory power offered by observer shaping, yes.
Yeah.
A shared blueprint expressing itself diversely.
And what about the feelings? That profound sense of unconditional love, unity, oneness reported so often, which seems less culturally specific?
The protocol addresses that too. It suggests that experience, McKenna called it gooey love, isn't just an abstract spiritual notion. In this model, it's the subjective feeling of the individual consciousness resonating in perfect harmony with the whole, with that underlying universal field.
A feeling of connection.
A profound feeling of unity and belonging. And importantly, it connects this feeling back to biology too. It's seen as being biochemically mediated, at least in part, by floods of neurochemicals like dopamine, reward, pleasure, oxytocin, the love hormone, bonding, and serotonin, mood, well-being. So the deepest spiritual feeling is viewed as an interplay between consciousness resonating with the cosmos and the tuned neurochemistry of the brain, creating the felt sense of that resonance.
Wow. Biology, physics, subjective experience, all interwoven. This model is incredibly ambitious, trying to bridge so many domains.
It really is, from neurochemistry to quantum physics to mysticism.
But for any scientific model, the rubber has to meet the road, right? Testable predictions. What does the protocol actually predict that we could theoretically go out and test?
Good question. The white paper is quite clear on laying out specific, potentially falsifiable predictions. Three main ones. First, a neurochemical prediction. It predicts that future technology, allowing real-time neurochemical analysis of the dying human brain, will confirm a massive spike in DMT concentration. And crucially, this spike will precede the glutamate storm and the gamma wave surge we talked about.
So, showing causality. DMT first, then the electrical fireworks.
Exactly. This would require incredibly sensitive monitoring, likely in end-of-life care settings with prior consent, obviously, a huge ethical and technical challenge. But if that specific sequence DMT spike, then glutamate, then gamma is confirmed, it's strong empirical support for the trigger mechanism.
Okay, a clear target for neuroscience. What's the second prediction? Quantum level.
Yes. The second is a quantum biological prediction. It predicts that the biophoton field emitted during dying won't just be random light. It will exhibit non-local quantum correlations, things like entanglement.
Entanglement, meaning the photons emitted would be linked in ways that classical physics can't explain, no matter how far apart they travel.
Correct. Connections beyond local interactions or simple thermodynamics. Detecting these correlations, linking them specifically to the dying process, would suggest the biophoton burst really is an interface to a deeper quantum reality, not just metabolic noise. Again, measuring entanglement in a complex, warm, wet biological system like a brain is monumentally difficult with current tech, but the prediction is there.
Pushing the absolute boundaries of measurement. Fascinating. And the third prediction, psychological.
Yes. The third is a psychological prediction. It suggests that as psychedelic-assisted therapies become more common, which they seem to be doing,
Right, that's definitely a trend.
we'll see more people experiencing what the paper calls ontological shock.
Ontological shock, meaning shock about the nature of reality.
Exactly. As more individuals directly confront the possibility of observers shaping the idea that their consciousness plays a role in co-creating their reality, especially in these altered states, it could trigger profound existential crises or shifts. This, the paper predicts, will necessitate entirely new therapeutic frameworks, ones that integrate not just psychology, but philosophy, metaphysics, maybe even physics, to help people navigate these fundamentally reality-altering insights.
So these experiences aren't just relevant for the dying, but have huge implications for the living, especially if accessed therapeutically.
That's the implication.
These are definitely concrete predictions, even if challenging to test. And linking this back to the bigger picture, that PSUS-8 theory, it frames the brain differently, doesn't it? Not as a generator, but a receiver.
Right. PSUS-8's core idea is that proto-consciousness might be fundamental, maybe a property of that universal superfluid it proposes, and the brain. It acts primarily as a biological transceiver, a filter, a receiver.
Like our radio analogy again.
Exactly. Tuning into a specific bandwidth of a much larger universal conscious field. The DMT decoupling protocol then becomes a specific example of how that filter, that transceiver, might be radically altered or even bypassed during these liminal states, allowing access to a much wider spectrum of consciousness.
And this view elevates subjective experience.
It does. It treats first-person accounts not as dismissible anecdotes or mere hallucinations, but as potentially valid, crucial data points for scientific inquiry, especially when analyzed within a coherent framework. That's a core part of PSUMO integrating phenomenology seriously.
This really feels like a call for a new kind of science, a synthesis.
I think it is. The DMT decoupling protocol isn't just trying to explain NDEs, it's aiming to reshape our understanding of life, consciousness, reality itself.
By connecting the dots.
By presenting itself as a complete, coherent, and scientifically grounded model. It argues that phenomena that look like isolated puzzles, terminal lucidity, NDEs, DMT's role, biophotons, gamma waves, quantum effects, might actually be interconnected features of one elegant biological and quantum process.
Trying to dissolve that wall between the physical and the metaphysical.
That seems to be the ultimate goal. Not just a hypothesis, but a push towards a more integrated science, one brave enough to tackle the deepest questions by embracing diverse evidence and challenging old assumptions.
What an incredibly ambitious scope. It's really something to wrap your head around, bridging cellular biology, quantum physics, subjective experience, even ancient mysticism.
It definitely makes you reconsider the very nature of observation and language, too, that participatory aspect we discussed. The idea that our frameworks, our questions, our interactions aren't just passively describing reality.
But actively influencing it.
Maybe. Not just socially, but perhaps, as some of these more radical ideas suggest, even at a fundamental quantum level. It's a profound possibility.
And that leaves us, and you listening, with a really provocative final thought, doesn't it? If our deepest beliefs, our memories, our core patterns can actively co-create the reality we experience in these extreme liminal states, what does that imply about the reality we are all collectively shaping right here, right now in our everyday lives?
Challenging question.
And how might a deeper understanding of these processes, if they are indeed real, change how we approach living, how we understand our own minds, and maybe ultimately how we approach that universal transition that awaits everyone dying?
Food for thought, certainly.
Absolutely. We invite you, our curious listener, to keep pondering this deep dive. It really touches the very fabric of consciousness, this intricate dance between biology, physics, and the mysteries of the mind.